Hey folks, this is Russ Jones responding once again to Alex O'Connor in answering Alex. This video is in response to a sarcastic exegesis of the story of the Israelites leaving Exodus. This is a particularly hard video to do just because it's really difficult for me to be charitable to Alex in this situation. Either he has just completely missed important parts of the passage, or he is intentionally misrepresenting the story in a way that just looks bad for Christianity. I'll jump right in to explain it, but here we go. The first joke that he makes or cracks seems to be when he says, as luck would have it, Moses was discovered. The reality is that Christians want to consider that luck. We consider that providence. This was part of God's plan. He then makes the statement, it's almost as if the Ten Commandments aren't necessary. Okay. I don't know anybody in the Christian faith who claims that they were necessary. It could have been 11 or 8 or 100. What's weird to me about this is, the atheists normally are frustrated with God's hiddenness, and that God would overtly make it clear to everyone, here are my 10 commandments, seems to be something that we would want out of God. Even though they're not necessary, it seems to be something that would be useful or valuable. So I don't really get this objection or concern. I think it's just, once again, another attempt to slight Christianity. Okay, now we get into the really big, important question about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And it really betrays Alex's, and frankly, a lot of atheists' reading of this passage, because they completely skip on the most important verse relative to the Pharaoh's hardening heart, which is Exodus 3:19, in which God says he knows that the Pharaoh will resist, which means that his hardening of the heart is what we call corresponding will. He's just permitting the Pharaoh to have the reaction that he's going to have. And so when God is present, the Pharaoh's heart is hardened. But that's what the Pharaoh was going to choose anyway. Skipping over this verse, ignoring it, is so essential because it goes from a story about God making a person do something bad and then punishing them for that, to God simply responding to the free choice of a bad person. It's completely different. Once you read Exodus 3:19, which is part of this passage, I implore anyone who is doing an exegesis of this story to go read that verse and then come back and tell me that God hardening the Pharaoh's heart was not consistent with what the Pharaoh would have done anyway. All right. So he goes on to say, I didn't write the damn book, in a joking fashion. Well, apparently you didn't read it, or at least read it closely. So, it's just hard to be charitable to Alex here. He then goes on to joke that God needs a visual cue to make sure that, he doesn't kill babies in the wrong house, which is why the Israelites put X's on their doors. As if, that there isn't another explanation of why those X's on the doors might have been useful. Like, I don't know, maybe the Egyptians would have noticed that all of the Hebrews put X's on their doors, and those were the houses that did not have the problem, did not lose their firstborn. Maybe the visual cue was not for God, the visual cue was for the people of Egypt. At any rate, the Bible often expects people to make shows of their faith, and I don't see any problem with this. And I don't see Alex raising any kind of objection. There's nowhere in this passage that it says that God needs the X there in order to perform his will. It's just, this is the way he chose to do it. That's it. No objection needed. All right, he then goes on to say that this is one of the most fatal genocides ever recorded. This is obviously false. We, for starters, don't know how many Egyptians were alive at that time and how many firstborns were taken, but we certainly know that the population isn't anywhere close to the largest genocides that we know about. For example, the anti-theist Maoist regime was responsible for 45 million deaths in something like a 5 to 10 year period during the quote unquote Great Leap Forward. You couple that with the anti-theist regimes of Stalin and Lenin, and you've got more deaths on your hands than all of the religious wars combined in history. So we really don't need you to exaggerate here, Alex, what actually occurred, especially considering you have no idea the number of people who actually died. Now, this is not to say that mass genocide is a good thing, that all of these firstborns being killed were okay. That in any other circumstance, we would consider this to be a horrible thing. I think it's a horrible thing. And I think God thinks it's a horrible thing. And I think that the Israelites think that it's a horrible thing. There's no applauding going on. People aren't excited about this. But this was what was required in order for the Pharaoh to capitulate. And that's just it. This is something that's asked and answered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times over. And I'll just ask you the question, the viewer, to give me your response. Does God have a responsibility to extend the life on earth of people for any amount of time? And if he is, how long is that? So on Christianity, we believe that the soul is immortal, at least unless you're a conditional immortality proponent. So the death of a person in this life is not permanent. It is not the end of them. But even if it were, it just doesn't make any sense that the gift of life that is given to you, for some reason, has to be a certain amount. It'd be like me giving my children $5 as a gift, and then someone saying, no, if you're going to give a gift of money, you have to give it always, and you can't ever stop. You have to continue giving money. It just doesn't really make any sense. So if someone has a good argument to suggest that in giving life, God is required or morally obligated in one way, shape, or form to extend life a certain amount of time, then please provide it. Please give me that argument. Otherwise, God has the right to end the lives of everyone, which he does divinely ordain or through his providence choose when people are born and when people will ultimately die. And as the author of life, as the giver of all life, that's his prerogative. It's not in any way an obligation of his to extend life a certain number of years. And if so, what is it? 10 years, 50 years, 70 years, 120 years? Indefinitely? All right, I'm going to just leave this here. I want everybody to go read Exodus 3:19 if you get a chance, just so you can tell exactly what's going on here. But the reality is that Pharaoh was going to freely reject them in the first place, and God's hardening of Pharaoh's heart was completely consistent with the Pharaoh's own free choice. So anyway, thanks for taking the time, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the story. Thanks.